Okay, welcome to Stepping Stones. I'm Caroline Stevens, and today I'm interviewing David Noakes via Skype from Devon. Welcome, David. You've got a great tale to tell. You've got a big tale to tell. But for the benefit of the people on Facebook and on YouTube, can you firstly introduce yourself, what you've done in the past, and what's been happening to you in the recent times when I met you at the AV9 conference at the beginning of May? So, David, over to you. Who are you?
Okay, well, I'm David Noakes, the CEO of Immunobiotech Limited, and we used to employ 27 staff, 4 scientists, 7 doctors, and 27 staff in total, and we treated 11,500 people. And we treated them with GCMAF, which is a human protein and a human right. And if it was put into the NHS, where 160,000 people die every year of cancer, 120,000 of them would be saved.
Right. Is this specific types of cancer where it helps, the CMAF?
Yes, it's all tumor cancers, which is 90% of cancers.
90%, right. I didn't know that. So, I mean, when we met at the AV9 conference, I did hear a very moving testimony from a lady based in America whose sister had had cancer and hadn't been aware of your CMAF availability, and she'd passed away with $700,000 of debt for her estate. But her sister had the same genetic cancer. Is that right? Genetic cancer, and she managed. You sent CMAF to her, which is produced normally in the human body, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. It's GCMAF, Golf Charlie Mike Alpha Foxtrot. It's produced in the blood, and it's in less than a billionth of a gram of all of us. It has 20 fabulous effects on the human body. Everyone knows that it rebuilds the immune system and it activates macrophages, but very few people know that, for example, it stops secondaries and it...
Sorry, what did you say there, David?
It stops secondaries, cancer secondaries.
Right, okay. Does a secondary, you mean an extra cancer or it repeating?
Well, you get a primary and then you get secondaries, which can be anywhere in the body and can be different. So, and it also stops angiogenesis. So angiogenesis builds blood cells, arteries into tumors to feed them, gives them blood and nutrients which feed them. And GCMAF stops the creation of arteries inside tumors. And it does 20 things in total.
So there'll be a lot of people watching this at the moment, and they'll be thinking, gosh, because I mean, if they're like me, I had no idea that there were cancer cures. You know, you see these cancer research, all these charities asking for you to go on a race for life. And I'm sure all of us have had our lives touched by somebody passing away from cancer. So for some people, this information might be quite startling. So what happened to you then, David? How long have you been running, issuing this CMAF, and what is your story then?
Right. Well, GCMAF was discovered in the 1980s, and we started making it in 1990. And I was just furious that all these scientists, 300 scientists are now involved with GCMAF. And they've written 150 scientific research papers from 8 nations. I mean, the science behind GCMAF is absolutely rock solid.
So where are these research papers are found on the internet easily?
Yes, you can go to PubMed, the National American Society of Medicine, and you can do a search on GCMAF or do GCMAF and DBPMAF, which is another name for it, and you'll get 78 of the 150 research papers right there. Because a lot of research papers are republished for a second time on the National Library of Medicine in the United States.
And you ended up by taking over the company, being the chief executive. And what actually happened, if we look at the chronology, when did things get choppy for you?
Well, I founded the company, and everything went fine until the beginning of 2015, when we got the first of 14 raids by over 100 police officers. All in all, we've had 33 persecutions, none of them sanctioned by a court.
So did they present? So they didn't present a warrant, or was it a fake warrant? I mean, how does that work?
They did have some kind of warrants for some of the raids. Usually the warrants weren't valid, but that didn't stop them. They just raided anyway.
Because they are supposed to be an original document signed by a court, a judge.
Yes, but for example, one of the raids in Guernsey, the warrant only allowed them to look for our laboratory. Well, of course, we've never had a laboratory in Guernsey. All the GCMAF that came into Guernsey was coming into Guernsey, not going out. No GCMAF went out from Guernsey. So, you didn't exactly need the brains of a scientist to work out we didn't have a laboratory in Guernsey. But that didn't stop them. They raided for 12 hours, took away 125 bags of so-called evidence, and
were your staff were your staff on the premises at the time?
Well, they raided the office and the house at the same time, 20 police officers on a bogus warrant.
Right.
And they don't care whether they are acting legally or not. I mean, we've had clinics closed down in 3 nations. And the big pharmaceutical companies who control their regulators, like the MHRA has... and
the MHRA stands for the Medical and Healthcare Regulatory Agency. So what is the MHRA? What is it as such?
Well, it's supposed to protect us from the big pharmaceutical companies and their drugs.
Right.
And it's also supposed to give support to new treatments, which is GCMAF. They should have supported GCMAF. But actually, with big pharmaceutical company directors on the board, it's a horrific conflict of interest, which results in perhaps 200,000 deaths every year. And the only thing they are interested in is protecting the profits of big pharmaceutical drugs and closing down anything inexpensive that works.
So the big pharma wins in respect of people are being subjected to chemotherapy on the NHS at an average of, say, £40,000 per head?
That's right. The average cost of chemotherapy is £40,000 a round, and GCMAF is 1% of that, which they really don't like. And of course, they don't want to get involved in making it because it's a human protein. It's not synthetic. It is a human protein, and you can't patent a human protein. You can't patent anything natural. So they don't want anything to do with it. They just want to wipe it out. And that's why we've had 33 persecutions, including our bank accounts closed. And, I've seen inside 5 cells. The last one was Wandsworth Prison. And this is what you get these days if you try to save lives. And we did. We saved hundreds of people from cancer and thousands from other diseases.
And it's ironic, David, because I know you have spoken at length about the influence of the European Union on the lives of ordinary British people. I've been myself very involved with the referendum campaign, and now I'm involved in finding independent candidates to stand for Democracy 17-4. So we realise that political parties have got lots of MPs with vested interests in big pharma, green energy. Some of them are on the sex offenders register, and so on and so on. And the MPs believe that Parliament is sovereign, strangely, and we believe that the people are sovereign. So, it's ironic that you were talking about the EU, and now we can now move on to talk about the European arrest warrant.
Well, firstly, people don't realise how much the British laws have changed while we've been inside the EU. There are 3,000 European laws and 120,000 regulations now on the English statute. And they can now close any bank account anywhere without going to court, just the word of a bureaucrat. And that's how our accounts were closed. So no bank account is safe.
So the situation with you, your banks, you've gone to your bank and tried to get money out and they've said your account's closed? Or did they write to you or ring you?
No one ever contacted us. First thing we knew was when our credit cards didn't work. The government never, ever contacts you, nor do the banks.
Wow. So they make a phone call to the bank and then the bank does the rest?
Yep, that's right.
So surely that seems to be direct collusion between the banking industry and the regulatory authorities then?
That's correct. Absolutely. This is the European way. You are guilty in England now until you prove your innocence. That is the European way. It's always been innocent until proven guilty, not in England anymore.
The Napoleonic Code?
Yes. In 1992, Corpus Juris came to England, and by 1996, all common law was swept away. And the British Constitution has gone as well. And we now live in what is very much like a dictatorship. And the Remainers have no idea. Unless you do something the government doesn't like, in which case they can close you down like a flash with no legal interference at all, unless you have done something, let's say, interesting, you will never know just how corrupt the British government has become under the European Union.
Yeah, I mean, it was ironic actually. I was in Westminster yesterday, and I was sat next to a lady who had voted for Remain, and she was actually in the health service, but she was quite influential in the health service, and she was being purposely excluded from certain meetings when, for example, they would include meeting Jeremy Hunt and having a frank exchange of opinions. They inadvertently forgot to tell her about that meeting. So your video, after we've spoken, I intend to pass it to people like her, because this needs to come out. Because had she known your story and slotted it with what she's now encountering in the health service, she probably would never have voted Remain in the first place. So this video is going to be, it's going to play a pivotal role in fighting back. I mean, we're talking about democracy in this country. I met Dominic Grieve. I don't mind admitting it. Dominic Grieve, a qualified lawyer, isn't he? And he said to me in April, he understood what common law was. He said it hadn't been airbrushed out of the lawyer's books. But he did say Parliament is sovereign and the MPs can do what they want. I have a witness to that. I went in with my Brexit bag. I was supposed to not say anything and just sit and listen. But can you imagine an MP? And of course, what's just been happening? These same MPs are on television saying, we're going to thwart Brexit, and quite frankly, David, I'm sure you agree that we're not getting Brexit, but it's more closer integration. Why is it that we would have been accepting all these regulations since the 23rd of June 2016? The writing is on the wall, surely.
Yes, I completely agree. But the European arrest warrant, which was agreed to by Edward Heath, is really quite horrific. So any British person can be snatched out of England and taken to a European jail. And the worst jails in Europe are in France. They're absolutely horrific. A French female doctor has written an expose on what life is like waiting 18 months to get in touch with a GP, and 100 successfully commit suicide every year in French jails because they are so awful.
So how many people have tried to commit suicide in French jails?
100 die each year.
But did you say there was quite a few thousand actually attempt suicide as well?
Oh, yes, 1,000 attempt suicide every year.
Yeah.
So what happened was the MHRA contacted Oakes, which is their equivalent in France, and they put out an arrest warrant for me, quoting 9 fraudulent, completely false charges. And they then copied them to Linda Thayer, but she's completely innocent. She's never been involved in the manufacture of GCMAF or its distribution.
And who is Linda?
She is a biomedical scientist, one of the 4 scientists who worked for me.
Okay.
So she's got these 9 charges against her. One of them was money laundering 11 million. Well, actually, they finally admitted they counted the zeros in the total, and actually it was 111,000, which is the money that she had saved while she'd been on the GCMAF project, because I was paying for everything. And so that was her salary for 3 years. She's so the British courts cannot stop you going to France. So in France, she can spend 2 years, 4 months in a jail on bail. They won't let her out. And then her court case may start. But, the court case can't take place unless I'm there. So, and I am fortunate in that at least I'm being tried by the MHRA in England on November the 5th.
Which is holding off them taking you both back to France, effectively.
Which is stopping me going to France, but not stopping her, because the MHRA rightly decided she was completely innocent, so they're not charging her. And the French should have done the same thing. But no, they've charged her with 9 completely false charges. And she may die in a French jail because they are so bad that lots of people don't make it to the end.
Well, I know that I stood for Parliament in 2015, and this was a particular campaign of mine to bring the European arrest warrant to everybody's attention. I used to, at public meetings, I used to play the Gerald Batten video. You must have seen it. Have you seen it? He's just pulled.
No, I don't think I have.
I think people like him and Frederick Forsyth and myself used to talk about it a lot, but it seemed to pass most people by. And I recall that I think it was about November, December 2014, this British government under Cameron, and Theresa May was the Home Secretary at the time, they actually had the opportunity in November 2014 to say, well, actually, we're no longer going to be party to the European arrest warrant, and we can just basically hand it back. But they did not. They chose not to do that. That was deliberate on our Parliament's part. So when people say, oh, this MP's good and that MP's not so good, that Parliament, that Conservative government, well, it was Conservative and Lib Dems at the time, they were all voted for the European arrest warrant to be handed back. Now, I think it was only a few weeks ago, that Theresa May made she made a speech, didn't she, in, was it Germany? And she was talking about the European arrest warrant, about having closer cooperation with the other EU nations. And she basically has capitulated over this European arrest warrant. So I cannot see how we're getting Brexit. You see, all the mainstream media is focusing on is about trade. If you have your liberty curtailed, for starters, you are not interested in trade. The trading side is smokescreen and mirrors. If we haven't got a fishing industry, if we've relocated Ford Motor Company with EU grants to Turkey and all those people are made unemployed, they're not. We want our security, we want our sovereignty back, and our MPs are doing nothing about it. So what would you have? You got a message to the British government? Have you got a message to the people? What would you like to say?
Well, we want no deal. There's nothing we want from Europe. We were so much better off before we entered into Europe in the first place.
Yeah.
And we don't want anything to do with them. And as for the European arrest warrant, if you get a corrupt judge or a corrupt department like Oakalesp behind the arrest warrant, they can just put you away and let you rot. And that is absolutely disgusting for us British people. Now, of course, under the British Constitution, the British government is not allowed to hand you over to people overseas, to foreign governments. But the British Constitution and common law has been swept aside under the European Union.
Absolutely.
Illegally, completely illegally. And lawyers and judges really don't care about the law. They just care about doing what they're told, it would seem.
You see, you have to ask why nobody in the establishment, why none of the MPs are putting their heads above the parapet. Why are none of the judges following what is right? Why?
Well, I've heard that 95% of judges are Freemasons, and if so, that would be the reason.
And then you've got common purpose, the neuro-linguistic programming, which has been quite rife over the past 10 years in the civil service, and counsellors and so on and so on. So we've now got such a corrupt barrel of, we've just got such a barrel of rotten apples. Where do you start? You have to empty the barrel out because they're all contaminated.
Yes, I'm afraid getting out of the European Union is just the beginning. There are so many corrupt officials in positions of power, and they've all got to go. But before we can take advantage of being out of the European Union.
Well, David, anybody watching today, how can they help your case to bring greater awareness to the plight of you and Linda? Can they write to their MPs?
Yes, you can write to the MPs.
Letters?
Look at our website, which is gcmath.se, and click Why Us.
gcmath.se.
.se.
Okay.
Golf Charlie Mike Alpha Foxtrot .se, Sugar Echo. And look at the MHRA corrupt website. The MHRA is just unbelievable that they could have big pharma directors protecting us from big pharma. And of course, they do no such thing. And they totally abuse the position of the MHRA. It does the exact opposite of what it is designed to do. And it's just amazing that MPs, ministers, Jeremy Hunt allow the MHRA to continue with big pharma directors. Unbelievable, unforgivable.
So who set up the council in the first place? Is it under governmental control?
Well, the MHRA is under government control, yes.
And it's under Jeremy Hunt's control at this moment in time?
That's correct, yep.
Right.
Yep.
But all these MPs know that Jeremy Hunt is controlling this council, which basically has chief executives of Big Pharma sat there. And there's obviously a direct conflict of interests because it's not in their interests. They're not interested in supporting the patients. They're interested in making profits for their shareholders and their chief executives.
For Big Pharma, yeah. For the big
Pharma.
pharmaceutical companies. I mean,
Okay.
both the directors, Ian Hudson and Gerald Heddle, are ex-GlaxoSmithKline. So, they approved Avandia, which killed 80,000. They approved Seroxat, which is also called Paxil, which is horrific withdrawal symptoms, and killed 1,000 people. And that is what they do. They license drugs that kill, and they make it impossible for treatments that work, like GCMAF, to make it to the general public.
So how are you spending your time between now and November? How are you managing with the banks foreclosing effectively on your accounts?
I don't have any accounts. I don't have any dealings with banks. I have nothing.
So have they still got your money in the accounts?
Yes.
And it's your money. So
Yes.
Let me just speak to the screen because really the person in the government that I think people had hoped were going to, the MP that was going to help the Brexit team the most, the one that is most highly revered is Jacob Rees-Mogg. So I'd like to pass this message to Jacob Rees-Mogg, who's actually he's in a neighbouring constituency to me. Jacob, if you're listening to this video now, please get this case looked into immediately before there's any more problems. We want David and Linda to stay in this country. You, Jacob, are the person who talks about common law and the Magna Carta. I've heard you talk about it. If you truly believe in what you say, then put your words into action and help David and Linda today.
Well,
Thank you, Jacob.
The important thing is to get GCMAF into the NHS, where it will save 120,000 lives a year. And, of course, to get rid of those big pharma directors in the MHRA. And those are the first two things, much more important than anything else.
Well, I can't imagine what it must be like to have to be supported, literally financially supported by everybody you know, and to not be able to go to your bank and get any money out. Talk about a cashless society. Anyway, David, have you got anything to add before we close this programme?
Well, thank you very much for having me on. And,
thank you so much for coming.
And, let's save the 120,000 people a year who are dying unnecessarily of cancer. We were doing it in our clinics. We were saving 75% of terminal stage 4s. And actually that figure went up by the time we finished. By the time they closed the final clinic down, we actually got up to 89%. So, we were continually getting better. We had 7 doctors and 4 scientists working on it. And, there are 120,000 people dying unnecessarily right now. And it happens every year. And it's all the fault of government.
Well, David, the message to all the people watching today, we're going to make sure that this is shared. We're going to talk about it everywhere. We've got lots of marches coming up this summer. We won't rest until this matter is sorted. MPs beware. Thank you, David, once again, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline.
You're welcome.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.